the Finance, Efficiency, Economy, and Sustainability Subcommittee. We're going to go ahead and start this meeting like we always start the meetings of this committee with the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilman Nowakowski, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so we have here in the subcommittee room, I have my colleagues, Councilman Waring and Councilman Nowakowski, and then I believe we also have Vice Mayor Valenzuela on the phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's move to the second item then on the agenda, the approval of the September 16, 2015 minutes. I would entertain a motion for approval.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of September 16, 2015.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Number 3 is for information only. These are the August 2015 Key Phoenix Economic Indicators Report. Do I have any questions or comments from my colleagues on this?
Can I ask? I should ask this earlier.
Councilman Waring.
Maybe we could we hold this until the end and just, I know we got executive session at noon.
Yes.
But if we have time, I might like to ask some questions, but don't want to burn into time for stuff we're voting on.
Perfect.
Is that fair?
That is fair, unless my colleagues object.
problem.
Sounds great. Again, thank you,
Or unless it ties up a staffer.
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to sit here the whole time, so.
We'll have them come down. If
Okay,
we have time
that's
at the
fine.
end, we'll bring the right
Thank you.
person here.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for that. That now takes us to item 4, which is alternative fuel vehicle acquisition strategy. Mr. Trujillo. And Ms. Peters.
Good morning,
Morning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. We are here today to talk about alternative fuel vehicles and our approach to acquisition. And I will turn this over to our esteemed Public Works Director, John Trujillo, who will go through this and explain what we're up to today.
Thank you, Karen. Mr. Chair, members of the council, I have with me today Brandy Barrett, our Fleet Services Deputy Director, and will help me with this presentation as well. I want to talk a little bit about our alternative fuel vehicle strategy. And the reason we're bringing this up today is because in the last few years, our fleet is aging. And as you know, budgets are not as good as they used to be. And so we're trying to figure out a way to provide alternative financing as well, finding a way to improve the age of our fleet. So it has increased from 7 years to over 9 years just in the last few years, and that's all general fund. But if we just focus specifically on the general funded only, it would be a lot higher. So we know that we got some issues there. We have a deferred equipment replacement of about $151 million. A fleet that does need to replace, but we've deferred because of the budget issue. So we're trying to find ways that we can improve the age as well as it's to help maybe improve the maintenance cost as well as looking at sustainability as part of our program, whether it's greenhouse gas emissions or using alternative fuels rather than oil. And so we got some ideas. I'm going to have Brandy Barrett talk to you a little bit about it today and on what we'd like to do and some options that we'd like to possibly see we can do moving forward, working with finance and budget and research.
Thank you very much, John. Good morning.
Morning.
The Public Works Department Fleet Services Division manages the life cycle of the city's vehicles and equipment, with the exception of the public transit and aviation department fleets. Our fleet is comprised of more than 7,000 units that are worth almost $370 million. As John mentioned, our fleet is aging, and as it continues to age, it becomes more expensive to maintain. But we employ 182 talented mechanical staff who maintain our fleet, and the department also manages the city's fuel program. The Fleet Services Division has implemented a sustainable fleet strategy designed to minimize fleet vehicle emissions by reducing petroleum and increasing alternative fuel use. We already employ many best practices for sustainability, also from a procurement perspective, including using the EPA Smart Way designation as a guide for purchasing flex fuel vehicles when they're available for the application, right-sizing equipment as appropriate for the task. For example, if we're purchasing a truck, we ask, is it going to be towing? If not, we go with a smaller engine size. Another good example of that is the move to micro cars for parking enforcement purposes. The city has been a leader in evaluating and implementing alternative fuels and alternative fuel vehicles since the early 1990s. Over the years, new alternative fuels introduced include B20 biodiesel, E85 ethanol, liquefied natural gas, compressed natural gas, and we even have one plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. Last fiscal year, 58% of all the fuel the city used was an alternative fuel. That's equivalent to 8 million gallons. 42% of our fleet are alternative fuel vehicles, and that's equivalent to about 2,700 vehicles. The city has been recognized over time for our sustainability efforts in alternative fuel use. We've been ranked over the past 5 of 6 years in the top 10 of green fleets across the nation by Government Fleet Magazine. In 2013, we received a Maricopa County Air Quality Excellence Awards for our utilization program. And most recently, the U.S. Department of Energy's Clean Cities Program, local chapter, the Valley of the Sun Clean Cities Coalition, recognized the city for our sustainability efforts in the area of alternative fuels. The Valley of the Sun was ranked first in the U.S., in the whole nation, for the greatest total petroleum reduction through the use of alternative fuels. One great example of how the city is achieving this is through the transition of solid waste refuse vehicles from diesel to CNG. Our first refuse truck that runs on CNG arrived in March of 2010. Today, 30% of that fleet runs on compressed natural gas, and we're working over the next 5 years to increase that to 80%. So even though we're leading the way for alternative fuel use in the nation, there are opportunities to continue and improve and to use additional alternative fuels, which is really why we're here today. There are many options to consider in how the city can continue to increase usage of alternative fuels and acquire alternative fuel vehicles. One option that is very timely to explore is the use of electric vehicle, or EV, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, PHEVs. That technology has continued to mature over time, and additional purchase and financing options have recently emerged. Initial costs for EV and PHEV vehicles can be up to 30% higher than other vehicle types and also require additional infrastructure investment in the form of charging stations. However, ultimately, the startup costs would need to be weighed against the value of potential reductions in maintenance costs, as well as reduced carbon emissions, less reliance on volatile petroleum markets, as well as anticipated improvements in that technology. So one thing is for certain, creating a sustainable alternative fuel vehicle strategy, it's a complex undertaking, especially because we have limited in-house knowledge with this EV, PHEV technology and these new financing options that have emerged. And that is why the department is respectfully requesting the subcommittee recommend City Council approval for the Public Works Department to hire an industry expert to really assist staff with identifying the best industry practices and financing for alternative fuel vehicles, electric vehicles, and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, as well as the associated infrastructure, preparing a cost-benefit analysis of those various alternatives, review and compare costs associated with various acquisition options, as well as really take a look at our fleet. We have a very, very diverse fleet, a very, very diverse application of how we use that fleet, and look and see where does it make financial sense, where does it make operational sense to employ this technology, as well as other alternative fuel technologies. We'd like them to support us in developing an implementation strategy and timeline, as well as eventually assisting with drafting a request for proposals. As we kind of move through this process, we would work closely with budget and research as well as finance. We want to be sure that we are aware of any potential impacts of the various financing options. And of course, we would return to the subcommittee following the study with an update.
And as Brandy mentioned, Chairman and members of the subcommittee, we have about a little over $8 million a year that we spend for fleet replacement. The majority of that goes to, as you know, to the police and fire. However, we just went into a leasing option with the fire department, so there's a portion of that $8 million that's going to be taken away for leasing payments for those. So there's a little over $7 million that we really have available per year to replace our fleet. And so as you can see, we're trying to find alternatives that we could improve the age of our fleet and look at other alternatives that to do that. And so, as Brandy mentioned, it's about $64 million a year that we do spend in maintaining our fleet. And so we're trying to figure out ways to minimize that cost if possible, using some type of alternative financing or alternative ways to improve the age of our fleet. With that, we have any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation, Brandy. And John, questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilman Nowakowski.
Well, John, first of all, I just want to thank you for thinking outside the box and really, while you're on top, you're still trying to figure out ways to continue being the best in the country. With that, how much would it cost to actually hire an expert to do this study for us?
We are expecting anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000. And the reason we're asking for that is even though we do have some expertise in-house as it relates to fleet maintenance and repair, we don't have the expertise as it relates to what's out there available on alternative financing for fleets. And we would like a person that has that experience to go out there and look at best practices, what other cities have done to figure out ways to improve the age of their fleet as well. So that's why we would like to figure out how to bring someone in to help us with that.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Couple questions. So when you talk about $64 million a year in maintenance, is that what you said? Does that include just filling the vehicles up with gas, or is that in addition to the $64 million?
I believe that's a separate line item.
Okay. Any idea how much we're spending on fuels?
No, oh, it's combined.
That's combined.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, because that's a pretty big number.
Thank you.
And so I assume one of the things we would be looking at is how much that number might be reduced by going to another, for example, electric vehicles. We've obviously chatted about this. I'm very excited that you're looking at this opportunity. We really are leaders, and John, I congratulate you when it comes to what's been done with the solid waste vehicles going to CNG. And, I'm excited about what other opportunities might be available on the other vehicles in the fleet, especially given the fact that they're getting pretty long in the tooth.
Yeah.
So if we are going to look at something like electric vehicles, which really checks a lot of boxes, I think, for us as a city, it's innovative. It will hopefully bring costs down. This is probably the right time to be looking at it. So with that, I would certainly entertain a motion. Again, what we're talking about here would just be hiring a consultant to help us to evaluate strategies, and then possibly an RFP or something alike might come out of that.
Correct, Mr. Chair. And we would also ask, when we get this completed, we would come back to subcommittee with our findings and our proposal moving forward.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation to go into an RFP process.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. And again, just so this is to bring the consultant on board, right? Okay.
That's correct.
So we have a motion, have a second. Any discussion? All right, with that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. So just clarifying, that was you're voting in favor, Vice Mayor?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That then takes us to item 5. This is the capital project delivery. Good morning, Mr.
Chair and
Dovalina.
Committee members, thank you. Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you for the opportunity. We do have a long history with this type of project delivery. Prior to the year 2000, the only way to deliver projects was through a low bid process, and through a lot of different visions, a lot of different things that we've done throughout the years. And just to recognize the person that's in the audience, Dr. Wiley Barrett is in the audience as well. He was one of the pioneers that helped us move forward with looking at other types of delivery methods. So today, Keeney's going to just go through the history and how we deliver some of these projects that we have now with this type of delivery methods. Thanks.
Thank you, Ray. Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee, I have the privilege of talking today with something I'm very passionate about. I've had the opportunity to be able to work with the city for about 15 years in different positions, but all my positions have been dealing with delivering capital projects and the procurement of capital projects in support of it. Prior to that, I had an opportunity to work in the Navy as a Civil Engineer Corps officer doing the same exact thing for the federal government. So it's something for close to 20 years I've been working on, and so I feel very comfortable coming and talking to you about it. But to get to the heart of the presentation, it's really about how do we deliver our $3.2 billion CIP to make should have the maximum value for our citizens, and making sure we have public facilities that last, that function as they're supposed to, and being our expectations and our citizens' expectations. However, I plan to start off a little bit different and have a little bit of an analogy. Hopefully it's a simple analogy, but hopefully an effective one on to start off my presentation. So to make it a little personal, imagine you have a project you got to do around your house. It's a honey-do list or something like that. So you're getting ready to do it, and you go out to the garage to try to get your tools to start working on your project. Well, then you realize when you get out to the garage that you only got one tool. And it looks like this. And now this can help you do a couple different things, but it doesn't help you do everything. So you're thinking, well, maybe I can do something. If I'm stuck with one tool, I'm going to try to do as best I can and make it as efficient as I can. So you make some changes, maybe trade it in for a Craftsman crescent wrench. This may help you a little bit more, make it a little more versatile, but it still can't help you do all those different projects around the house. So you're thinking, well, I've got some good ideas. Maybe I'll make this even double up and make it a little more efficient. So you come up with this, the mother of all Swiss Army knives. This right here maybe helps you do a lot of things around the house. It might be able to help you go camping, do a lot of projects around the house, maybe take over a third world country. A lot of different things you might be able to do with this. But how comfortable would you feel if you hired a contractor to do some work at your house?
True, this was recovered at Sky Harbor? Or
possibly.
On what side of security?
High security. But to the heart of the matter, if you hired a contractor to come to your house to do work at your house, and they showed up with this as the only tool in their tool belt, you'd question them, like, how's my deck's going to get built? How's my fence going to get built, let alone get painted? So that's, as silly as that sounds, that's how we delivered projects here in the state of Arizona and for the city of Phoenix for decades. So the questions lingered. How can we do better? How can we give ourselves more options? How can we deliver projects quicker, with better quality? And how do we get away from this contentious relationships that happen between the public owners and contractors on low bid type projects that we were doing for decades? Well, a lot of like-minded individuals who had the same goals in mind got together in 1999. As Ray mentioned, Dr. Barrett was one of those. Our former city engineer was involved in that process. And what was unique about this group is it was led by the Alliance for Construction Excellence. It's a group out of Arizona State University. They were seen as not having skin in the game. They were impartial, trustworthy. They could be counted on by both public owners and the contractors. So they got together, developed House Bill 2340, which passed the legislature in 2000. And so what did that give us? And this chart kind of shows what we have available to us now. And it's broken down into 4 methods. We have low bid, design build, construction manager at risk, which is abbreviated as CMAR, and job order contracting, abbreviated as JOC. Now, each of those, kind of explain the chart here, you've got an option of being able to select off of price, off of qualifications, or a combination of qualifications and price. So I'll get a little more into detail of each one of those. But I did want to point out that in the report, I think it was page 3 of the report or page 35 of the package, there was a typo in there that identified CMAR as city manager at risk. Now, there may be a lot of contractors out there and some folks who may be supportive of that, but I may be speaking on behalf of Ed, but I don't think he's going to be supportive of a city manager at risk procurement method. So with that, I'll go into a little more detail on each one of these delivery methods. Low bid. Very, very simple. This one we were very familiar with, using it for decades and decades. We hired a designer to help we work with to define a project, to work it out. We put together a bid package that we then put out and advertise. And what happens is whoever a firm is, if they have a license, if they have the insurance and they can provide the proper bonds, then whoever they provide the lowest price, they get the job at the end of the day. So what this ends up being a lot of times is you do a lot of work on the design side, but you don't involve any of the construction side. So you're making a lot of decisions sometimes for the contractors, and it may not be as efficient. Well, I know from a lot of cases when you're looking at bid day, there's 2 questions that you're left with: what's the price going to be, and who's the contractor I'm going to get? And we all know that the price, because you don't involve the construction side, sometimes it's a guess. Sometimes it's an educated guess, but it's not necessarily the best guess. And on the contractor side, we know that all contractors are not created equal. And so some can deliver better than others. And so to be able to provide more flexibility, that's why some of these methods are available to help us to be able to bring better quality, better timeliness and delivery of our capital program. Sorry, I want to mention that project right there at Desert Sky Transit Center, I think it's in Councilman's district there, a very successful project that's under construction right now through low bid. And I know when it gets complete, it's going to be a great facility for West Phoenix. Some other projects we've done through low bid, successfully completed: airport projects, transit projects, streets projects, and even parks projects that you see up here on the screen in front of you. Moving to design build. Now, as I mentioned, in the low bid environment, you're hiring a designer and you're working with that designer on the project, how it should be developed and how it should look, but you don't involve the construction side. Design build takes that a step further, and you end up hiring a single firm to help you do the design and the construction. And so this allows you to have a lot of flexibility in how the phasing, staging, how to bring some creativity and ingenuity into the process. And a lot of people ask, why would you use design build, in what conditions? And maybe I simplify it or oversimplify it, but I think there's three situations. One is design and construction integral? Are they kind of closely intertwined to each other? An example I'd use of this is an elevator project. We have a lot of times where elevator projects are designed and built by the same types of firms. So it makes more sense sometimes if you're going to be having an elevator type renovation project or installation project to bring a design build firm involved. Another one is, can we define the finished product well enough that we can hire a firm to go out and have maximum flexibility and creativity in designing it, as long as we get the finished product we have in our minds at the beginning. And so we leave a lot of the details to the design and the construction firm to be able to make those decisions. And then thirdly, have we done it before? Is this something that's new? Is it complex kind of a project? How often do we do this? Does city staff have the expertise to be able to define fully out what we want here? And what I put in this category is our largest CIP project right now, the Terminal 3 modernization project, is through design build. And because you think about it, how often do you do a $500 million renovation project to an active and ongoing terminal and make sure it has minimal impact to our citizens? And that's one of the reasons why this method was selected for that project. Some other projects we've successfully delivered through design build. Lake Pleasant Water Treatment Plant, built in the early 2000s. It was our first design build, and it actually had an element of operation and maintenance in it as well. What happens sometimes with these projects is you have a firm come in, helps design it or construct it, and they're gone once we get the keys to the facility. Well, in this case, the firm that's involved in design and construction is doing the ongoing operation and maintenance of that facility as well. The School of Journalism, fast-track project, wouldn't have been completed if we hadn't had design build at our disposal to be able to get ASU students in their seats for the fall semester. West Transit facility, we hadn't built one of those facilities in more than 20 years. So it made sense to use design build to bring in outside expertise to help us to figure out what it's going to be looking like and how it's going to operate. Sonoran Desert Drive, under construction right now up in North Phoenix. The reason why we chose design build, it saved us close to $12 million from what we thought we were going to have to pay for this project. And it's getting done to our expectations, and we're looking forward to being done in the next few months. Moving on to construction manager risk. This is kind of, if we need a little more control over design, we have the ability to hire a designer and a construction contractor at the same time. The benefit of this type of a method is it allows us to have that contractor provide good feedback and review of the design during the design. So ultimately, we'll get a better phasing, better construction quality, better constructability of the overall project with this type of a method. And our signature example of a CMIT risk, our construction manager risk project, is the convention center expansion that we did. And we all know that the successes and the events that we've been able to hold at that convention center since it was completed. Some other projects that we've been able to be successful with construction manager at risk: the police crime lab, and also the restoration work we did at Steel Indian School Park with Memorial Hall, and the fixed facilities for SkyTrain. And we did an pedestrian underpass at 24th Street and Camelback through CMIT risk as well. And then the method I'd call is our kind of a workhorse here at the City of Phoenix is our job order contracting program. Right now we have approximately 93 active contracts for job order contracts, and those are covering about 42 different scope areas throughout the city. And what this does is it allows us to do smaller projects using a contractor we have on board for up to 5 years, and we have a developer relationship with them, and they do small projects. And what's happened is, if you've seen our CIP over the last 8 years, it's gone from excess of $7 billion down to about $3.2 billion. Well, we still have a lot of the same needs that we had 8 years ago, but we have to be more strategic how we meet those needs. And one of the ways we've been able to do it is by looking at these smaller projects, and JOC, job order contracting, has been a great tool. As we know from the street overlay program, we are highly dependent upon the job order contracting program to help us execute our pavement preservation work throughout the city. Other types of projects, we do work all around the city, water projects, aviation projects, renovation work at the historic City Hall, and also at the Convention Center. So it's been a great tool for us. And because you end up, when you do these kind of presentations, you kind of have to pick what's the best project or best project photos to be able to show up there. Well, these are ones that were left over at the end that I thought needed to be in the presentation. These are great facilities, award-winning facilities that have defined, different areas in the city of Phoenix, have defined how we live and work in the city of Phoenix. So I think these are great projects: fire station project, library projects, civic space, and Cesar Chavez Library. And so that's not all of the one great successes we had. There's plenty more that we could talk about, but I did want to highlight those today. So to get to the 30,000-foot view of how we've done over the last 15 years, this chart probably does better than any of them in talking about what we do and how we deliver our CIP. You look at design build at the top, it's only 1% of our projects, but we deliver 10% of our CIP through design build. So it's for those larger projects. Similar to that with construction manager risk, we're about 3% of our CIP of our projects, but it's almost nearly half of our CIP is delivered through construction manager at risk. It's been a very effective tool for us. Low bid, still a very dependable method for us. A third of our projects and a third of our CIP is delivered through low bid. But the big one there is job order contracts. 62% of our projects are delivered through job order contracting. But because of those smaller level projects, it's 13% of our CIP. So in total, about $8.7 billion worth of work we've done over the last 15 years through these different delivery methods and executing our CIP program. So what's coming up in the future? Obviously, with Dr. Barrett here, our partnership and our collaboration with the Alliance for Construction Excellence continues. Is a good tool and a communication feedback that we have with the industry to make sure that as public owners we're doing the right things. Secondly, legislative process. We're always looking for legislative improvements to how we deliver our capital program, and right now we're in the midst of meeting with contractors and other public owners, and Alliance for Construction Excellence is in the room, and talking about 5 or 6 different proposals we could to tweak the legislation and the procurement rules to help us more effectively and efficiently deliver our capital projects. And then policy of procedures and training. Because of the turnover in staff and what we have going on in the city, and we want to make sure we're being as consistent as possible across the city in how we manage our projects, how we deliver our projects. So that's going to be an ongoing process, similar to what the assistant city manager with this core process is. That's what we're doing. We're trying to implement those things in how we deliver our CIP. And then finally, trying to find ways to streamline. We mentioned the job order contracts are 62% of our projects out there. Is there ways that we can streamline that effort? Right now, we do rely heavily a lot on one-step job order contracts, which are qualifications-based contracts, meaning that we negotiate every time we use one of those contracts, we negotiate individual job orders. Well, if we can use a price component in those, and we're trying to look at more options to be able to do that, then it takes a lot of that negotiation process out of it. Then we're able to focus on the project, get them out quicker, and not have as much variability potentially in negotiations between different groups who may be negotiating those contracts. In fact, we have one that's going to be going on the formal agenda today, a 2-step job order contract. And then on our contracts itself, so we're just trying to figure out ways to make them more simple, more streamlined, so they're easier to use for city staff and for our contractors and consultants that we work with. So in closing, I think, as Ray kind of pointed out, these are often talked about as being alternative delivery methods: construction manager risk, job order contracting, design build. But because of the efforts we've made at the city to early adopt and to bring these into how we do business on a day-to-day basis, I kind of don't feel it's appropriate to call them alternative delivery methods. I just call them our project delivery methods, because that's how we execute our CIP, and it is such ingrained in what we do on a day-to-day basis. So with that, concludes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Keeney and Ray. A very interesting presentation. We do have a couple of comment cards. My colleagues mind if we go to those first, and then we can open it up to any questions. So you heard him mentioned, and here he is, the legend, back again for a repeat performance. Dr. Wiley Barrett, please join us. Great to see you.
This is a new experience for me. First time I filled out a speaker card.
You're normally at the...
Let me see if I can figure out how to... Is this on? Hello, test, 1, 2. It's on. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, subcommittee members, for having me here today. Kenny mentioned a little of the role of the Alliance for Construction Excellence, which is where I work today in bringing about this legislation. A little history, perhaps. I was here in the area, but not working at the city in the 90s and the late 90s, and there were spectacular failures on capital construction projects around the state, and the city of Phoenix was not immune to that. Those of you that were here in the city staff at the time, 1988 GEO bond program, lots of those projects ended badly. The city library, the science museum, those projects, almost all of those projects ended in claims and litigation. So the stakeholder group, as Kenny mentioned again, saw all of that and saw the opportunities that were available to the public sector that weren't available to public owners, and said that we can do better. So let's get together, let's figure out how to do this better, let's bring about a legislative change. My last assignment in the Corps of Engineers, I was at ASU, so I was a part of that group, more of an observer than an active leader in it, but observed that process. Saw the legislation going through, came to the city in late 1999, and the city moved quickly to adopt. I had experience using design build in the Army Corps of Engineers, what they called IDIQ contracts, which were corollaries to job order contracting. Saw the opportunities, had used those methods to good effect in the Corps, and saw opportunities for the city. So we moved quickly, and the staff at the city supported those changes, and we very quickly started using them. I think a funny story, you might not. We moved out to start using the methods, and we hadn't gone to council. So Mario Saldamando, the city engineer at the time, and I did a very quick meeting, presentation, about 10 minutes to the mayor and council at the time. Everything that we had done up to that, we called it a pilot, and took that to council, and took roughly 10 minutes to tell them everything they needed to know about alternative project delivery methods. And at the end of that presentation, one of the council members, and I can't remember who it was, said, does this mean that we don't have to do everything low bid anymore? And the response was, yes, you are correct, Mr. Councilman. We have opportunities now to use other tools to deliver projects better. And basically we were told, go forth and use these methods and come back to us periodically and report on that. So that's what Keeney has done for you here today. A little about the Alliance for Construction Excellence. We continue to engage with the industry, and we didn't get it perfectly right the first time. Councilman Waring might have been down there and might have been a part of that, but we did not get it perfect. And so we continue to tweak as we go. And we're in that process right now. And Keeney has brought the input from the city of Phoenix into that group, and we're going to propose some legislative changes that make the process better for everyone, for owners, for contractors, et cetera. The Alliance for Construction Excellence continues to train. We've trained 10,000 people in how to use these methods over the last 15 years. We're doing a training class today on job order contracting at the Disability Empowerment Center down Washington. And Keeney's got 5 or 6 of his employees in the room learning how to use the tools more effectively to come back and manage better projects for the city of Phoenix. I think I'm up to my 2 minutes of speaker time, so I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Dr. Barrett from my colleagues? Yes, please.
When did you
Vice
start
Mayor.
smiling?
The load was taken off of Vice Mayor. That was
Good seeing you. It's always good seeing you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Second speaker is Deborah Margraf.
Thank you very much, Councilman Gates, members of the subcommittee. My name is Deborah Margraf. I'm with the Arizona chapter of the National Electrical Contractors Association. I appreciate that you're looking at this issue. It's been an issue that some of my other association executives and I have been wondering about for several years. We believe also in the process that the subcontractors need to be treated well, we feel that the subcontractors are being beaten down in this whole process, that under the CMAR at risk process, as I understand it from the city of Phoenix, that, you select the general under qualifications, but then the subs are all picked based upon low bid. So again, that's why I'm here looking out for the subcontractors, and I do appreciate that you're looking into this.
Thank you. Yes. Keeney had wanted to respond.
Kind of what Wiley had mentioned was that we maybe didn't get it right the first time with the legislation back in 1999, 2000. A change was made in 2007 with regards to the subcontractors on these alternative delivery methods, and that the fact that we could select them on price only and low bid prior to 2007, but change was made that from that point on, from 2007 on, that we could only select subcontractors based on qualifications or a combination of qualifications and price. So we do not strictly low bid subcontractors on any of our projects. Is not allowed under the state law.
Thank you. I just follow up on that. I think what I heard was the fact that we as the city are not involved. We don't have a direct relationship with the subcontractor. Maybe you can talk about that issue a little bit.
Yes, one of the things that we're required to look at and require our contractors to have is a subcontractor selection plan. We want to make sure that that subcontractor selection plan is in accordance with the state laws I mentioned earlier. But because of contractual and legal arrangements, where our contract with the city is with the prime contractor or the general contractor or the construction manager at risk. Now we may be involved in talking with them how they go about selecting the subcontractors that work on a project, but we don't get involved in actually helping them select the subcontractors because we don't want to cross that contractual line, that legal line, that's their responsibility to select the subcontractors.
And is that a part of the state law? Is that why we can't, or is that more kind of general legal concept?
General legal concept.
Okay. And if a subcontractor has a concern, though, do we have an open door policy? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, there's several different ways. For example, we have a small business enterprise program. We have a disadvantaged business enterprise program. In both those programs, one's a local one, one's a federal one. If a firm is in one of those categories, we closely monitor those contracts and the utilization of those firms. So if there's anything that's a subcontractor is being treated unfairly, we have the opportunity to go and work through that process and help through that process. Secondly, if there's any legal issues related to how the subcontractor is being treated, maybe like prompt payment, because that's a legal requirement to state law. If there's issues with the subcontractor has with the prime contractor, we have an obligation as the city to get involved to make sure that everybody is paid appropriately on our contracts. So we do get involved and provide protections to subcontractors in certain situations and conditions like that.
Yes, Councilor Nowakowski.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank our chair and all my colleagues that advocate for better ways of allocating funds and projects within the city of Phoenix. Also, all those individuals that really fought and advocated for that House Bill 2340 for alternative methods of hiring individuals and contractors for projects. And saying that is one of the concerns I have is that when we go through an RFP process, you have a general contractor and then you have subs. And I think that we look at the whole package and we look at the quality of not just the contractor itself or the developer, but we also look at the quality of the subs that come along with that. Once that contractor or that developer wins that bid, then they have what I'm hearing is that they sometimes go back to the subs and say, look, we were allocated this bid, but now we have this much allocated for your portion of the contract. I don't think that's right. If somebody comes in with a bid and basically asks a sub, what is it going to cost to wire Sky Harbor third terminal, and then all of a sudden the contractor's saying, sub, I can only give you so much instead of the price that you quoted me and the price that I went to the RFP committee and got the deal for. Could they actually turn around and get another sub? Or is there a protest period? And is there an audit system that we have to make sure that if we're trying to get the best quality for the city of Phoenix and the best quality staff to actually build whatever it is, that the subcontractors that they say they're going to use are being used?
A couple ways, because I mean a lot of that, Councilman, is maybe to particulars dependent upon the project that we're talking about. But there's several different ways where subcontractors can be selected. For example, in the Terminal 3 renovation project, there are subcontractors who are design assist subcontractors, meaning they've been selected already, even though the construction may not be starting yet, because they're vital, they're key areas that they said we want to use a subcontractor for. Those are negotiated with that subcontractor for work out there. There's other areas that may not be as critical that they will go through qualifications and price selection, meaning that they will look at qualifications and price in selecting somebody. But after they select, I mean, when you get to that point of when you're selecting those on the qualifications and price, it's the scope should be defining what the price is. I mean, we all have a budget, and all projects have a budget, but there really shouldn't be a situation where we're agreeing to a budget or a price with a contractor, and then they're going and telling a subcontractor what that price should be. That shouldn't be happening.
Is there an audit process that if we agree to a certain package and then they end up switching out the subcontractors, that we can go back and say, hey, what's going on here? We agreed to this team that you created because of the quality of work that this team will present, and all of a sudden the team is switched up and it's not the same package that we agreed to in the RFP process.
Typically, if there is a switch in subcontractors during the course of construction or during a project, that's something that needs to be cleared with the project manager and through city. So because we want to make sure there's a valid reason why a switch is being made. And there's plenty of valid reasons why there may be, but we want to make sure that there's no reason, like what you're saying, bid shopping or something like that going on that would cause that to happen.
So there is a project manager from the city that works along, all right. So if there is a protest or a complaint, they would just go to that city's project manager.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Other questions or comments? So maybe just to delve into that a little bit more, so is there a representative from the city when the contractor is hiring subcontractors, or let's say interviewing different groups? Is there a city representative who's involved in those interviews?
Typically not. Typically, we're going to be having those discussions with a firm throughout the process about their process to be able to select subcontractors, but we will typically not be in the room when they're making a decision on who the subcontractor they're going to use.
So like on the T3 project, there was not a city representative in the room on those?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. It's just a little ironic because we were in the same room yesterday talking about how closely we're watching everything at the airport and fingerprinting people. So it's just kind of an interesting comparison there. We have another speaker who's just turned in a car, Louise Schmidt.
Thank you, Councilman Waring.
Thank
Gates.
you. Wow, what a compliment.
Yeah. See, we got him to smile. He finally smiled.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes. I missed half of the presentation, but
Yeah, it did. You didn't
Mr. Happy.
play back the tape.
yes, play
Go
back
ahead.
the tape.
Sorry,
He
I
did
will
smile.
not take that, assess that against your time.
No, that's fine. I'm not quite the star that Dr. Barrett is, but I know you'll be firmly on the time. So, anyways, we're here talking about. I don't know what action. It doesn't look like there's any action that you're being asked to take today. Right. But as far as contractors, and I want contractors to be held accountable. I want them to be treated fairly. But at the same time, we have to make sure that the city, the taxpayers, get protected on this too. You asked a good question. Councilman Nowakowski, you did ask good questions. As a City of Phoenix electrician, we have seen, that sometimes work gets contracted out, but there's very little accountability. And oftentimes, city staff cannot go ahead and, there's really, the contractors get left alone, and the city's solution is, you know what, we don't care, just fix it, just fix it, just fix it. And because, again, the city, at the time it takes to try to figure out who did what, we can't put the public, we can't make them wait, so the city fixes the stuff. The low bids, I understand that it's not always a good thing, because I've seen it here firsthand in the city of Phoenix, what happens when you have low bid, because someone can come in, fudge the numbers, and then they go in, and who's the victim of that? Not only the taxpayers, but it's also the workers for some of these subcontractors, because you have low quality work that when you have a low bid, it's not always the best approach. But the city historically always looked at the low bid was saving the taxpayers money. But when you have low bid, there's consequences, and there's costs that never get revealed to you, because there's costs of city staff going back and fixing those things. So I just wanted to just give you a little bit of some of the information that I had on design build, design build operate, those type of projects. We have seen traditionally they do work, but we have seen other ones where towards the end of the contract, there's going to be very little maintenance that gets done to those projects, facilities, whatever it is. And then what happens is because they know that the city's going to take it over, and then the city comes in and they have to spend. I'm just throwing it out, but millions or lots of money to repair that. To bring the facilities back up to grade. So since there's no action today, I just wanted to give the committee just a little bit of input from what we've seen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. The cards are flying in now. We have another speaker card here. Dean Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dean Howard. Thanks for letting me speak for a minute. We've been involved with a number of subcontractors on the selection process side of the CMAR design build and the whole system, if you will. The system itself, I think, is fine. I think where we're starting to see problems is in the subcontractor selection process that was alluded to just a few minutes ago, specifically on the GC side, not what the city's involved in, but on the GC side. So our concern is how do we improve that process so it's crystal clear, there's transparency without putting the city at risk of stepping over that gray line into that process, if that makes sense. We have concerns with it, yet there's legislation that's being discussed now of how to improve that. And I think it's important if somebody who has that knowledge could speak about that, because there is a solution to that. I've been talking for a while about third-party verification. If there's a way to do that, audit, some type of system that can give this city the better ability to say, the process is clean, the process is right. That's the piece that the subcontractors are starting to have concerns with. Does that make sense?
Perfect. Yes, Councilman Nowakowski.
I have a question. Is there a way for us to maybe, I know we can't answer it right now, but maybe have some individuals from that industry sit down with some of our staff and figure out if there is a way for us to have some type of a audit when it comes to the general contractors and what they've agreed to and what we've agreed to when we issue RFPs, so that basically it's all clear and that those subcontractors feel that that they have some protection also when they're out there giving their bids to the general contractors for RFPs to the city of Phoenix. So maybe you can come back to us on that and gather some information.
Of course. That makes a lot of sense, and obviously we are coming up on the session starting soon, so to the extent that there may be legislative fixes out there, I think that's good to get our government relations folks tied in as well. Other comments or questions
Mr. Chair,
from our colleagues? Yes, Mr. Dovalina.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add on, in any type of federal type of projects like the aviation area, I mean, there's a lot of requirements we have to put in our specifications. So there are requirements for homeland security and background checks. So ultimately, anybody that's working in the airport are going to have those requirements. So
Understood.
just to make sure you're
Understood. Absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that we didn't have those. I think I'm still having flashbacks to yesterday's subcommittee meeting, which was run very adeptly by the vice mayor, but it was long. Other questions or comments? Otherwise, the great discussion. Keeney, thank you very much. And probably not the last discussion we'll have on this item. So thank you so much. And that takes us on to item number 6. City Clerk Electronic Records Management System. Morning, Mr. Meyer.
Morning, Chairman. Morning, Chairman Gates, members of the committee. We're excited to be here today to talk to you about this project and discuss it. This is a project that will replace a system that has served us well for over 2 decades, but it has obviously reached the end of its life and needs to be replaced. And the proposed new system will provide greater transparency to the public and provide a lot of potential for efficiencies within the city and make it easier for the public to access the records. I've asked Deputy City Clerk Ben Lane to talk to you about this project. He's done a great job leading the project and getting it to this point, and I'll have him describe it to you.
Thank you, Chris. Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee, we're very excited about this new system. What we're proposing to do, as Chris mentioned, is to implement a new electronic records management system. The system will be an all-in-one system, which will capture the documentation of records from creation to destruction. It'll also have increased automation, eliminating several manual processes. Right now, we process certain non-procurement contracts in a paper format. We can do that electronically now and save on that. It's also a scalable solution. In addition to housing city records managed by the city clerk department, other departments can also be included in this system and store their records as well. Finally, it will lead to greater efficiencies and greater transparency in the sense that all documents will be stored in a searchable format. So as Chris mentioned, our current solution was implemented more than 25 years ago, and it consists of 3 separate databases. Now, when the system was implemented in 1990, it was actually quite innovative in that it allowed us to store and search for documents electronically and to allow the public to search for those documents electronically as well. At the time, in 1990, it did win several awards, including the International Institute of Municipal Clerks Grand Prize for Records Management and the Office Automation Society International Award as well. However, our current system is not a true records management system in that it's really only a document management system in that it cannot automatically purge records set for destruction. We have to do that manually right now. And so what we have right now is actually 3 separate databases. As I mentioned, we have our document management database. We also have a separate database for our retention schedules. The retention schedules tell us how long to keep records for. They're set by the state. We follow state law on this. But right now, it's a separate database that doesn't talk to the document management database. We then have a third database, which is for our record center. Now, I know the first time I saw this picture, I said, so where is the lost Ark of the Covenant stored? I found out it's in aisle B, row A. No, I'm just kidding. But we do have, this is also a separate database for the physical records that we store at our record center, which is located at 22nd Avenue in Lower Buckeye. This is a separate database. The issue right now is these 3 databases don't talk to each other. They're not linked together, and so it causes issues. So the records we maintain, the City Clerk Department maintains quite a few citywide records, including resolutions, ordinances, City Council reports, requests for council action, RCAs, contracts, and also meeting minutes. So those are all the records we maintain for the city. Our procurement process for this project was we went through an internal process. We created a sponsor and stakeholder groups. We have 12 departments represented in our sponsor group and over 20 stakeholder departments. The budget approved by the council was almost $600,000. And what we did was we actually did a 2-step process. We did a request for information back in March of 2014. The responses for the request for information were due in May of 2014. And what this allowed us to do is to really understand the market participants and the technology, so it was very helpful. Based on that request for information, we then did an RFP, a request for proposal, that was published in November 2014, and the responses were due in January of 2015. We had 16 respondents, which was we consider that to be an excellent turnout. We had a 4-member panel evaluate those 16 respondents on multiple criteria, and from there, we had 4 finalists. Those 4 finalists, which were these companies, Companion Data Services, Data Bank, SystemSoft Technologies, and Wave Technologies, they came in and did in-person demos of their products to us. And from there, the 4-member panel chose SystemSoft Technologies as the winning bidder. We believed that they met the city's needs most efficiently and most effectively and cost efficiently. While we're still negotiating with the vendor, we do believe that the implementation costs will come in under the $600,000 budgeted. So in terms of our future state, what we're really excited about is that this new system will take the 3 separate databases I talked about earlier, the document management, the retention schedules, and that record center database, and combine it all into one database, which will be fantastic. That will make the retention and purging much better because the databases will be talking to each other. Additionally, the search format will be improved as all documents stored in the system will be searchable. Right now, unfortunately, our contract by hand. can around much more efficient. So we're very excited about that as well. Finally, the other thing we're very excited about is that multiple departments have expressed interest in the solution, including finance, real estate, fire, human resources, parks, retirement services, and water services. Right now, some of those departments don't have a database solution for their records management, or they have a database solution that's reaching its end of life. So what we can do is actually give them their own module in our database to store their records, their own separate module to store their records. But where the savings come in is we only have one license rather than multiple licenses, and we also share the costs of the ongoing maintenance of the system. So we feel like we can actually save the city quite a bit of money over the long haul by, as these other records databases that other departments have, as they reach their end of life, we can eliminate those and have those departments come onto our database solution. So today we're recommending that the Fees Subcommittee recommend approval to the City Council to award a contract for our records management system to SystemSoft Technologies. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Councilor Nowakowski.
You know, last month we talked about this municipal municipal ID card, and we said that it would cost us about $5 million. And I'm seeing that we're having a lot of software, we're having all these departments coming to us, and especially to the formal meetings, asking for allocations of $500,000 to millions of dollars. Now, one of the things I want to make sure is that in the future, are we going to start interfacing with all these different databases? I know that you talked about different departments, but how can we as a city of Phoenix, I guess more to our city managers, how do we make sure that we are that social, internet, media, whatever it is, that we combine them all together so we don't end up having, if we wanted to create a municipal ID, that it's not going to cost us $5 million, that it'll be all interfaced with all these different departments. Or even in the future, if we wanted to create some type of an employee card that can go into different departments and stuff like that, that we can actually communicate within the 25 or whatever departments we have within the city of Phoenix. And we're not looking at some outrageous price tag to create something simple that if we're going to spend all this money, millions of dollars in technology, that it all interface with each other, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilman Nowakowski, it's a good question. And back on a slide, there was sort of a line buried in there that talked about an approval by the IT governing board. That's actually something that Ms. Cotton and I created in the last year or so, that every project coming forward of a technology nature in the city is going through that. And that's myself, a couple of outside IT experts, department heads like John Trujillo are on there. And we're making everybody go through a process where they identify what they want to do, how much they want it, how much it costs, how much it's going to cost over the lifetime of the project, and whether they're thinking through all those different connectivities like you mentioned. So as we move forward, every project, and this is one that went through that, has to come in and demonstrate how they're either why they're not using existing technology that we have, like SAP or Oracle or whatever, or how they're going to connect seamlessly to those if they have to do something other than those base systems that we have. So we are, it's going to be a process because a lot of those systems you talked about, like in library and parks, those are big systems that have been in place for 10, 15, 20 years. As they come up for renewal, they're going to go through that process, just as Mr. Myers did with this.
And then, Ed, I was just thinking, why can't we actually have a programmer that can create software just for us as a city and then turn around and we can sell it to other cities in the future? Because it seems like there's not a program out there that interfaces all the different departments throughout the country. So what happens if if we can become the pioneers and actually create our own type of software that interfaces all the departments and turn around and sell it to other cities? I mean, it seems like we're going paperless, we're using technologies to its fullest, but I don't think we're really using it to its fullest. So how can we start thinking outside of this box that we're kind of closed in and start to really use technology?
Yeah, actually, one of the things that we've found in this is it's actually the opposite problem is what we have. We have some systems where we did have city employees try to software engineer them, and they almost always are never as effective as the off-the-shelf solutions created that that are more standard issue. And so, as we're going through, more often than not, what we've got to do is get rid of the systems that were sort of jerry-rigged by well-meaning city employees and city departments, but they don't talk to each other because they were developed in a silo. And it's better for us to first look and see, does our SAP system provide this? Does our eCRIS PeopleSoft system provide this? Do our Oracle systems provide this first? Can we use those and adapt those rather than the other way? There may be an occasion, sort of like the previous one, the toolkit may sometimes need to include us creating a unique solution to it, and then we absolutely ought to look to sell that nationally. But in most cases, the case is what exists that we can buy off the shelf. It's sort of the difference between, buying a computer from the Apple store or sitting at home and creating your own computer.
Right.
Almost always you're going to be better off going to the Apple store or the Microsoft store and getting the off-the-shelf solution.
Well, District 8 and District 7 has become that mecca for those entrepreneurs. So, hey, there's an opportunity for y'all. So go out there and create some software for us.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Just add a couple quick questions. One, is this a cloud solution or?
Councilman, it's Chairman Gates. It's actually an on-premise solution. The application is web-based, but we'll actually be storing the records on a server in the city. We feel that's a little bit more secure. A lot of these records are of a permanent nature, such as our meeting minutes and city council reports. And so to have those records still on-premise, in case something happens as a company down the road, we don't have to worry about losing those records, the electronic copy of those permanent records. So the application is web-based, but the solution is on-premise, so we'll be using our servers.
I could just add, Councilman, we had a lot of discussion about this particular item and actually put out the RFP. You accepted both types of proposals, on-premise and cloud, and then worked through part of the process in selecting it with IT, and their recommendation was that we go with the on-premise for primarily the reasons that Ben mentioned.
And just as a follow-up on that, and that was kind of because of the sensitive nature of these records, or is that a broader strategy that we're taking, that we're kind of backing away from the cloud as a city?
Councilman, it really didn't have anything to do with the sensitive nature of the records. It was more about just making sure that we had the records in case something happened to the company. I will say this is a very stable company. They've been in business since 1999. So they're a stable company, but if something happened down the road and if, God forbid, they went belly up or something, we'd still have access to our records. We wouldn't have to worry about that issue.
And certainly in our department, we're not backing away from the cloud. We're going to be talking about the agenda management system that's going forward. That is a cloud-based application.
Good. I'm happy to hear that, because I think it has a lot of benefits for us as a city, but I certainly respect your professional, judgment on how to pursue this. With that, then, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion or questions for staff? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And this takes us on now to item number 7, the family medical leave item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could, I just introduce this item. This is, we're bringing this back from before the summer. We had some discussion about the FMLA use in the city and some things we identified, and now we've done some research. But big picture, Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA, is a federal benefit that we believe we must protect for our workers. The other thing that's interesting in the big picture is the city is actually more generous with FMLA than the law requires. I learned in all this process that the law just requires us to make FMLA available, but it does not require you to pay people for FMLA. The city allows employees to use their leave banks, which I think is the right thing to do. I would never suggest, and I know this council wouldn't, retreating from that, but that's interesting. The real issue here was raised by our departments in our core process, which is we have a lot of resources being expended in FMLA, and we have a decentralized process, so every department, every supervisor is sort of in charge of their own thing, and what was identified is inconsistent application of the law with employees, and so we wanted to change that. Our goals in this are to protect workers' rights, help our supervisors be fair and consistent, protect the city from liability for misadministering the law, and also provide the best possible service for our employees. The other thing that I focus on in this is I want to focus not only on the employees who are using FMLA, but on employees who are not, because it's the people who are coming to work every day, if they have a companion worker who is on FMLA, they are having to pick up that workload. And as we all know in our experience, sometimes you don't mind picking up someone's load, other times it can become a morale buster if there's too much of it. And so part of this is about ensuring the integrity of the use of FMLA so that when people are using it, there's confidence both among their coworkers that I'm picking up the slack for someone with a real issue, and there's confidence for the person using FMLA that people aren't wondering, well, you know, what are they doing? If we have a good, consistent, and fair process, then everyone can be confident that people who are using FMLA are using it appropriately and it's not an issue in that way. So the Human Resources Department has done a lot of research. We've talked with our labor groups. There's not 100% agreement between management and labor about the approach going forward in part, but we have had really good conversations about the need to centralize the administration of this, because right now it's inconsistent, it's dispersed. Our supervisors are not experts in HR laws like FMLA. They're experts in solid waste collection or finance or whatever they're supervising in. And so we think centralizing is going to put this in the hands of people who are actually better trained. And then at the end, we have an option for actually taking a look in the market to see if there are companies nationally who do this and might be more cost effective. But with that, I'll turn it over to our HR Director, Cindy Besri, and our Deputy Director, Fred Verdugo, who've done some research and who have talked with employees about this.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As you can see, this is a passionate issue from top to bottom. We've gone a very long road since we started our analysis in January. We've come back to you in this presentation with some of the information you requested from us, and Fred is in charge of this project, so we're all here to answer questions that you may have. Just by way of review, this is what we reviewed with you in June. These are the actual hours credited to our pay system for the calendar year 2014 that were being utilized by approximately 3,400 different employees who had certifications. As we got through our benchmarking work, we realized that's a pretty high number with our comparable cities and communities, and administration is an issue we've got to get handled in this city. And so as we also completed our benchmarking, we looked at the different things we knew that we had to do, and centralization was very key to us. And this is just a graph of the benchmark cities we talked to, how they were approaching their FEMLA issues to keep their hours down. And it quickly identified for us that as a decentralized model, we had some work to do, and that centralization probably was going to be a big help to us. Further, we started to look at how the year reporting went. There's a 12-month period within the law. We talked about that in our last presentation. And so we asked all of these comparable communities, how do you look at the year? We were one of 3 using a calendar year. And if you remember, we talked about a calendar year allowing a stacking at the end of a year and a stacking at the beginning of the year, which is operationally very difficult. Realized that the benchmark practice was rolling backward. And so we've made a recommendation to utilize that as well in our new administrative model. So coming out of the analysis we did, here are the items that we are in process of developing codes for, processes for, etc. A centralized model, which will give you kind of an organizational chart later on to talk about. We're going to use the benchmark practice of rolling backward leave, which basically takes the first year of the change and uses a calendar year. So it's fundamentally the same for all the employees. So they have a year to adjust to the change in the calendar year. The first time an employee will really see the difference is instead of in January 2017 having a calendar year forward, we'll go backward from January 17 to January of 16 to see what their eligibility is, February to February, March to March, and it will continue to roll up over the nature of their career. We're going to recertify annually. That is clearly a permissible practice under the law. Actually, under the law, we could recertify every 6 months. We found that annual recertifications were the common benchmark practice. We recertify right now every 2 years, so our data is often expired by the time we get around to it. We
What does that mean, recertify annually?
That means that when you bring in a medical certification that you have a qualifying medical condition and here is the time you need, we need to get that recertification updated every year for that employee. And we were doing it every 2 years. Consistent administration, as the city manager pointed out, asking a supervisor to try to do this who's supposedly trying to focus on picking up trash or cleaning parks is a really bad practice. We're going to stop that. We're going to get consistent administration with a consistent and well-trained focus group of employees. And lastly, one of the issues that came forward is we had some situations where secondary employment was approved for individuals that could be contrary to the medical restrictions that we're placing an employee under. And we need to review those processes to make sure that an employee's secondary employment that's been approved by the department head is consistent with a medical certification, and refer that on to the department head anytime we see that there's a conflict between that secondary employment and the current medical recertification that we have. So those are the areas we're focusing on. We had been asked by the committee to give an organization chart of how we're doing it today, and this very pretty depiction of it spread all over the city within various departments is exactly how we're doing it today. The hours that you see being focused in those departments are not necessarily one person. They could be up to 3 or 4 different individuals over that period of time handling a different part of this FEMLA transaction, whether it's the employee calling in, whether it's the actual medical certification data, whether it's the transaction getting into the system. And so this is the decentralized approach we're using.
Councilman Waring.
So back to the restrictions issue and the outside work that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, sir.
So loosely translated, does it mean restrictions have been placed on what we can ask the employee to do for us, but then they're going out and doing something at least as physically or mentally taxing in some secondary job, and somebody signed off and said that was okay?
What it means is that a department director at some time in the last 12 months has approved that employee to go perform a second job, be it whatever that job would be. Sure. Now a medical certification comes into us after that employment is approved that says, here's the things you can't do by medical restriction on your job. We need to align those medical restrictions with what that secondary job that director has approved them to do, to say, hey, fire chief, you've got an employee who's out doing a very physical second job, but they can't do the physical labor on their first job. So you need to consider whether or not you should allow them to continue that secondary employment.
I guess I would also consider the merits of this case. I mean, how in the world, so this employee is going out and doing something that they're saying they can't do at their own work?
That could happen, yes, sir.
That's what we need to make sure is not
That's what we
happening.
need to make sure it doesn't
Louis
happen.
Schmidt's shaking his head and saying no, so you might want to.
It could happen.
That could happen.
Yeah, we're not saying it is.
You're not saying it is happening.
This is something that gets checked on when you centralize into more expertise.
That doesn't
Okay,
get checked
I thought
today.
you had some examples where it had happened.
I do not have
That-
examples
okay.
here.
That would have been a more serious issue than it seemed like it was getting, but if
Correct.
it hasn't actually happened or you don't have any examples, okay, that's fine.
These are proactive preventative steps.
Okay, good.
Yes. So this is the organization today. Okay? In step 1 of the process, in addition to what we talked about, the changes we're making, here's what we would like a centralized organization to look at. The city manager has worked with us on that. The cost of $667,000 and some odd dollars is exactly the cost that we had approved through budget and research for what we're currently spending in the model you saw on the prior page. So we have gathered, with the help of budget and research, some vacant positions across the city In order to centralize this function in human resources, we will dedicate a full-time supervisor already in human resources with experience in FEMLA to this and fill the positions at the point we are ready to proceed with a full centralization. Part of the monies you see in this are being considered for a contracted medical review. One of the key components to making sure we're administering the Family and Medical Leave Act, which often runs right into the American with Disabilities Act, is making sure we have the appropriate medical expertise reviewing these items. We do not employ medical experts today. We would need to go out in the market for a contracted service to do that. Law is actually very excited about us having that kind of assistance in these particular cases. So part of the money would be used for positions, part of the money would be used for that contracted outside vendor. And this is step one. We are currently in process of coding changes to the payroll, all of the necessary things that we would need to do here with the systems that we maintain to have a centralized process. We have some work yet to do with our departments, and we will be getting a 60-day notice out, which means we have to give employees 60-day notice of the change of that rolling year that we talked about, and all of those items are currently in process and will be complete by the end of October. And finally, step two is a request back to you again regarding a third-party vendor. All of the changes you've seen up to this point have been reviewed by either myself or Fred Verdugo with the core team, unions and associations, administrative managers, HR liaisons, and all of the department directors. So I think we've covered all of our bases with the major stakeholders. This remaining item is the only remaining item, to my knowledge, that remains in conflict, primarily with our unions and associations. They prefer that we do this in-house as opposed to going out for an outsourced vendor. I, in good conscience, have to recommend that we look at it because an outsourced vendor provides service enhancements at potentially cost savings that we cannot do today in a centralized model, and I've identified those here. They have pre-programmed infrastructures in IT to administer and track FAMLA that include apps, that include 24-hour ability to do this online for employees, which we have 7/24 operations in this city. They have case management tools and very specialized case management software that can protect the private information that we're collecting under employees that we would do manually today. They would have accessibility to 24-hour hotlines that would be picked up on a regular basis because they maintain 7/24 operations, which we would be unable to do in human resources. They already have medical review on staff, and they also have professional level staff evaluating the FEMLA request at a higher volume than what we would have. And I think the opportunity to look at this makes sense for our city. And so the request before you today is to allow us to go out for an RFP and investigate these services in the market.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
So the 9 folks that you're proposing to be in the centralized operation, that's assuming that the council were to approve a third-party vendor, and if we didn't, would you need more than 9 people, or?
No, the nine positions or the money associated with those positions is all we would need. We are not projecting to spend any more money than we spend today.
If you go back to that, I think what it does is it sets up the comparison to, we would evaluate this model that we would do in-house against whatever the private sector might come to us and say, we can do this block of things for this amount of money. Let's compare that. Now, when we get down to it, we'll make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. I don't know that today exactly 676, 713 is what goes away if we outsource it. So we need to compare apples to apples, but that's sort of the things that we would evaluate. So again, the RFP is not saying we're going to outsource. It says we don't know whether we can get better service externally versus internally, but we would like to have something to be able to compare it with information.
Okay, yes, Councilor Nowakowski, and then we've got a couple of speaker cards as well.
You talked about a rollback for 12 months period. What does that mean for employees? Can you kind of explain that to me?
Absolutely. Today, employees are on a calendar year, so every January to December is a brand new FEMLA year for them. When we go to the 12-month rolling backward year, we would start that basically as a complete clean start on January 2016. So from January to December of 2016, that would be their first year. As we then go into 2017, that year will be January 2017 to January 2016. And then in February, it goes to February. It's actually a day-by-day rolling backward, but now that 12 months moves every day or every month, and that's for determining how many hours or what the eligibility is for that FEMLA request.
And the eligibility is 12 weeks per year is what the law
480
grants.
hours, yes.
So there's not a
12-month
set
period.
date that January 1st, that's your cutoff. It just keeps rolling with you, right?
Absolutely, sir.
All right.
All right, well, if my colleagues don't object, then let's go to the cards. First one is Louise Schmidt.
Thank you, Councilman Gates. I think I got your name right this time. You heard in the city manager's, when he was talking to you guys, that some employees do have second jobs. Well, because we've gone 6 straight years with concessions and cuts, employees are having to take on second jobs. So that is true. You know, that part of it is true. Employees are having to do more with less. You know, a lot of our single-family households, you know, they can't make it on one income and taking all these cuts, so they do have to get a second job. I do support a centralized model. I think that is the best model. I think the rollback portion, I think that is good. The state of Iowa just did this a few months ago, and it cost, I think it was like $2 per employee that they had to administer, and it was like over a couple $1 million. This is more of an administration problem. I'm glad that they want to help the employees, but I don't really have employees, calling any of the labor groups saying, we're having problems with, we need more assistance with FMLA. No, a lot of times it's, there's not compliance issues that employees are talking about. Now, I'm not on the city side where I know that they do have some, renewal problems or whatever, so those need to be addressed. But a centralized model works best. And that's the approach that works best. This committee is called I know it's a long name, Financing, Efficiency, and Economy and Sustainability Subcommittee, right? So let's set a good example today. And let's allow them to do a centralized model without going through the RFP process, which is going to cost more staff time and vendors time, because vendors are going to, anytime there's an RFP, they're going to put their time and their efforts into that. So let's have this committee be efficient today, and let's have this committee say, let's go with the centralized model, because right now we have bigger issues to worry about. I want to make sure that we're in compliance, but right now we don't have I believe that the best approach is to do a centralized model without wasting more valuable staff time and resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jason Stokes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Gates, members of the subcommittee. I'll echo Mr. Schmidt's comments in terms of we certainly believe that centralization is a tremendous benefit to the employees as well as the city, and we see a lot of consistency issues with the current model that we think would be improved with the centralization. There are some concerns as it relates to should the decision be to outsource. What I would ask is if the decision is made for an RFP. I think I spoke at the last subcommittee meeting regarding the process, the RFP process as it relates to labor's involvement. And currently labor's involvement in the RFP process is once the RFP is written, then generally there's a seat at the table for labor to review the submissions. Would ask that if the decision does get made to go to an RFP, that there be a representative from labor in the design of the RFP, because really that's where a lot of the rubber hits the road in these RFPs is in the actual design. Once it's designed, you basically have a matrix to work from, and there's not a lot of leeway in those situations. And so, concerns that I have had in looking at the benefits of an outside vendor would be things like the 24-hour availability. I am a 24/7 employee, and I can tell you that FMLA really is a day shift thing. You can't get your doctor to certify your FMLA in the middle of the night. It's not a hindrance as a 24/7 employee, as a supervisor. It's just one of those things you wind up having to do in the morning, and it really doesn't create too much of a problem. And if there's an additional cost associated with that, that would just be concerning to me. I want to make sure if we do go out for a private vendor, that we're not buying a level of service we don't need. When we look at the contracted medical review under consideration, that clearly there must be a cost associated with that. Currently, with your FMLA certification, a doctor signs off on this. A doctor that I would assume you don't know, that a doctor that has gone to school and spent a lot of money to become a doctor, and I don't think they'd be willing to risk their certification. And so there already is a level of medical review. So I just want to make sure that we don't basically purchase a higher level of service than we actually require. And then the other concern that I have is in relationship to the annual, just to make sure that we're not spending too much money on the annual recertification. I'm not opposed to it. It's just what that does do is it creates an additional cost to the employee because the doctor's charged for that. It creates, because of that additional cost, an additional cost to our healthcare system, which costs the city and staff work. And so I just want to make sure that it's the right balance. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. Those are all the cards that we have. Or comments from my colleagues.
Mr. Chair, I would just say...
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Barker, did you turn a card in? Yes, sir. Okay, I guess it didn't make it to me, so please, come on down.
Thank you, Chairman Gates and my councilman for including me. And I just want to say we have a success, and there's going to be a birthday coming up in November for Meet Me Downtown. And that was a project that was to get people to meet and greet, walk, run, use some facilities at the Y or over at Cityscape. And I've joined in on that. And, I won a $50 gift certificate for some running shoes. And so, once you complete that, you go back, they have a raffle. I'm sharing this with you because I like to talk about successes and personal commitment to sustainability. I know the city has goals of efficiency and that, but basically if people do or don't attend to those goals, then you're going to fall short. A recent study that I saw, and I don't know who put it out, lists the different cities in the United States that were the top in sustainability efforts. As I remember, Phoenix was not in the top 20. I think they were in the 40. And we're unlike any of those cities. However, I think we can look at some of them. New York City, I remember that's number one. And I can remember working there at Bloomingdale's like in 1970. And, I walked around the town, but most of the people drove. And now I guess it is more of a walking place, and they've done things with the road, basically like maybe some of the things we're doing downtown. And what I'd like to have is that we have a trip reduction plan that goes into MAG. Ed Zerker is respected over there at MAG. Ed, are you listening? I know you and Jim are talking. I'm going to tell on you. People like it when he runs a meeting because they get to speak. He was a teacher, and they tell me they get dismissed earlier. Okay? Phoenix is half of the vote at MAG, and a leader, Phoenix get knocked for doing the wrong thing but the right thing. And so what I'm saying is that we need to see the personal commitments from the management that they are out doing sustainability, fitness, going to food day over there. See some of your bios, what you're doing outside of the downtown too, to get people out and doing things and to do the sustainability thing. And in regards to downtown in the future, Adams Street is in the middle of the whole thing, and it could be a hallmark place where it is a showcase of some of the sustainability efforts. Hopefully, we'll get APS, which is a member of Downtown Phoenix Partnership, to be leading in using things like solar that would generate the water towers that would cool down the area and bring people out of the convention center.
Thank you, Ms. Barker.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add in relation to particularly what Mr. Stokes said. I think absolutely in this situation where we've had extensive dialogue with labor, and it is clearly important to them that having a member of the Coalition of Unions be part of the design of the RFP was something that Ms. Besry and I would absolutely make part of that. So
Great.
I have my commitment that would happen.
Great. Thank you very much. Questions, comments from my colleagues?
I have a
Councilman
question.
Nowakowski.
When I'm out there walking in the neighborhoods or just meeting with some of our employees that are retired, some of the questions that are asked are, what are you doing with our retirement, our benefits and all that, Michael, you guys are outsourcing, and we're not talking to city employees that understand our concerns and our needs. I think the central model that you have as step one, I think you have city employees talking to city employees during their rough times, during crises in their families. And I think that's something very important. I mean, our employees have been through pension reform, not just once, but twice. And the morale is really, really down, especially with our employees. And I just been hearing from individuals that now you guys are going to outsource this also. And we're going to lose that personal contact with another city employee that understands what we're going through, that understands the sacrifices that our employees are going through. So at this time, I'm not sure if I can really support that step 2 of this process, but I'm very supportive of the step 1 of centralizing it and using our resources to its fullest to really take care of those employees that have really sacrificed. A lot of them are wearing 2 different hats, and they actually have to go out there, as the testimony was given, that sometimes they have to go for a second job because of all the cuts that we've made here in the city. So I'll be supportive of step 1, but not step 2.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from my colleagues?
I just want to.
Vice Mayor?
No, I am also very supportive of a centralized model. I do appreciate your willingness, Ed, to be sure that labor is a part of, bringing him in early and being sure that labor is part of this process in creating the RFP, if that's the direction that we're going to be going. And, it's one of those things that I think can be handled. You're saying by doing an RFP doesn't mean that we're going to be spending money. Perhaps research isn't. It is a good thing. It's this very subcommittee was just talking about a potential municipal card, and I'm very much for getting the research on it. And so, and that said, I would support it, again, with the understanding that labor will definitely have a seat at the table and an opportunity to work with city management as this RFP is drafted.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Other comments or questions? Just one question I had. You had a slide that showed benchmark cities on which ones were doing the centralizing, and if you could pull that up.
Yep, there you go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So that one there. So I'm just curious, did you ask the benchmark cities on which ones had actually, used one of these outside companies to assist with the
Yes,
FM
and that's what you see with the third-party vendor right there. Of these
Okay.
17
I got it.
cities we talked to, one had gone the route to completely go to a third party.
Okay. And was there any hybrid approach or
There were no hybrid
no
approaches
hybrid
at this
approaches?
point.
Okay. Do you believe that there could be a potential of saving cost by using a third party group, or is really the focus on the level of the service, or is it both?
I think the focus today is on level of service. I think long-term, we could see some savings, but right now, our caseload is so high, we're going to need to work that caseload, get centralized, and make some administrative changes first.
Do we have in the, from the IT perspective, so I'm going to kind of look over the city manager here, when employees have questions on how to use Word or, Excel, things like that, is that all provided for in-house, or do folks actually, pick up a phone and utilize outside services to give them assistance in how to, do something specialized like that?
I think our general help desk is internal.
Okay. Well, that's something I think we ought to look at. But anyway, because I think that's something that, not to get off, and I know we're not posted for that topic, but I think that is something where maybe a future agenda item to look at. Any further questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, at this time we do, I think that the staff recommendation, if I'm not mistaken, the staff recommendation does not relate to centralizing. You're going to do that?
Mr. Chair, yeah, the city manager does have the authority in terms of managing employees to make a centralized model. So I'm going to move in the centralized nature as Ms. Besry talked. We got budget and research to help us identify the resources and the positions. The question really for the council is, do we want to examine that in relationship to an RFP response?
So I would entertain a motion at this time. Again, this would be just for going out to RFP, obviously not making a decision.
Correct.
On whether to utilize a third-party vendor.
I'll make the motion. I do want to make it very clear. I think the answer is right here with the centralized the centralized option, the centralized model. Excuse me. We should never be afraid of research. And again, I'll make the point. A few weeks ago when we were talking about the potential municipal card and what that could mean, and it's important to check those boxes and making sure that we're getting all the research. We shouldn't be afraid of research and information. I appreciate, and the reason it would be important to have members from labor is, frankly, no one knows these jobs better than the people that are doing them, and it's important that everyone is doing this in step, working together, trying to figure out with an understanding of what we would be looking for. And so that said, I know that's a pretty long-winded motion, so I guess my motion, is it okay to just say, I think that's what the motion would encompass, staff recommendation, right, is to move forward on a centralized.
What I understand the motion to be, is this is right, would be a staff recommendation emphasizing that the development of the RFP will include labor representation.
Right.
Development of it will include
Yes,
labor,
and
as
it's
well
not
as evaluation.
And it's not part of the motion, but you were saying.
That will happen.
Right. Well, actually, no, I'm talking about the centralized model as you.
Centralized model, we need to do that. It's
Right.
clear.
Right. And so
And-
that's
and-
not part of the motion,
Right.
but I'm willing to make this motion with the understanding that labor's will be included because we are moving forward, as you just mentioned, with the centralized model.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilman Nowakowski.
just some clarification. So we're not really looking at any savings to the city. If any savings happens, it'll be long-term. We're looking at more of customer service to our employees. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
And what I'm hearing from our employees and our employees' unions is that they like the centralized services, and they feel that the customer service that they'll be receiving from there would be a significant enough for them instead of going out there and doing an RFP. How much would this RFP approximately cost us?
I can't tell you that until I get the responses back from the vendors. We've
Well,
never
actually, doing the
organized-
RFP would be, I think that's your question, is how much would doing the, yeah. So the question of doing the RFP would be some staff time on the part of the city, but no out-of-pocket expense. There would be some expense, of course, for our vendors to respond, but they would have to decide whether that was worth it, knowing, as I'm sure they would examine this testimony, that it's not a certainty that we're going to actually end up going with a vendor. So they would have to evaluate that.
All right. Any other questions or comments? With that, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
All right. Motion passes 3-1. Thank you very much. All right. And we have an e-session that's coming up very soon. So in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and just move directly to the call to the public. Now, I do have Diane Barker's card here. I think we kind of heard a general comment before, and I didn't press you on
I
that.
apologize for that and interrupting the gentleman. I'm learning about the FMLA. I hadn't studied on that, and all I could think about was sustainability. So I am always open to having you say, Ms. Barker, are you off topic? How about another one? Okay, thank you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. And future agenda items, I think we have the items in front of us already. If folks have any additional items that they'd like to see the subcommittee addressing, got a pretty full agenda here. We have a couple items here that we'll obviously move forward.
We'll bring payment strategy back.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, unless there are any additional items with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.